how do you put the pieces together and say this is where ETH can go?
I think we are in the process of re-rating it to become global infrastructure. When ETH is the infrastructure that the whole world, both financial and non-financial, all businesses settle on, and we put $700,000 as a target. A lot of things have to happen to get there, but I think a $10 trillion asset is not out of question for global infrastructure. My target's higher than anyone else's, but that said,
80K is definitely up there.
I mean, 706K is really up there too, but
all right, Vivek Raman, thank you so much for being here, man.
thank you for having me. This is exciting. It's nice being in person.
It is good being in person, and I think right now it's the perfect time to be having this conversation about everything you guys are doing at Etherealize, and really, I think what's fair to classify as a reawakening within the Ethereum community ecosystem. Big things happening right now. And you were just down in DC talking about all this too. So there's a bunch to get into, but why don't we just kind of start with where your story begins, which is with Etherealize's launch, and maybe we can go even farther back before that. But what got you excited about being kind of one of the leading figures in this space to get Ethereum understood by Wall Street?
That's generous of you. The intention was never to be one of the leading figures in the Ethereum space. I just wanted Ethereum to win, and I wanted Ethereum to be adopted, and I saw a gap. And the gap can actually go back to like my story. I spent 12 years on Wall Street, so I wasn't early to crypto at all, unfortunately, but it's okay. It's still early. I have a lot of Wall Street culture built into me, and so I viewed blockchain and crypto as infrastructure and utility. So like I spent my 12 years on Wall Street. I was at 4 banks, Morgan Stanley, UBS, Deutsche Bank, Nomura. I was a trader, traded really esoteric products and credit and fixed income land. Honestly, it was the coolest network of people. I love people, I love networks, I love just like meeting interesting cultures and being around really smart people, and that was Wall Street. But after 12 years, I noticed that Wall Street didn't ever evolve. So it's the same people, it's the same processes. It was the financial system, runs the world, the US financial system, but like nothing ever evolved technologically. So I just started to feel a little bit of like brain stagnation. And that's when I left. I was like, if it's either the system will never evolve, so let's go find something in the tech space. And it was just complete serendipity. Most people can't leave Wall Street because it's a really nice life.
Yeah.
I hit the eject button. I ejected out of New York, which is hard to do. Moved to Austin. At the gym, met someone in the Ethereum space that was working on this thing called the merge, and I was like, what is this? And I'd heard of Ethereum and Bitcoin, obviously, while on Wall Street, but everyone poo-pooed it, and everyone was like, oh, this is not real. And so that was my worldview. When I went down the rabbit hole, unburdened from like the Wall Street biases, I saw what Ethereum was. I tried Uniswap the first time, and I was like, wait a second, this is literally how we can do the whole technological upgrade for Wall Street. So I obviously think Ethereum is the platform for institutional finance. I think it's the best designed and it's the most scalable. It's the one I want to win.
Yeah.
But like I wasn't a crypto maxi. I was like, hey, let's find infrastructure for Wall Street and for the world. And obviously like now, after 4 years of being in that rabbit hole, I think it's gonna literally be the backbone of everything. But that's the story that got me here. So there's a lot that happened between finding Ethereum and Etherealize, but that's sort of the bias I had coming into the space.
Well, I think it's a good way to frame kind of that, because the idea of the lens that people look through when they talk about crypto, I think is super important to establish with like any guest or any person you're talking to, because it's obviously a thing that can be, a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But you coming from Wall Street, my background being in financial media at Yahoo and CNBC, I think I looked through it through a very similar lens.
Yeah.
But it's been interesting because it seems new. It really hasn't been that up until now. And, with what you guys are doing at Etherealize for a long time, and maybe this is a hot take, but it seems like a lot of the Ethereum community was just developers. Or that the idea was it was a story that was only really being told and understood by developers. And then Ethereum comes along. Like, talk to me about the idea of why Etherealize needed to be created.
Out of necessity, like not something like it. What would be a sad outcome is if this incredible technology was birthed 10 years ago, blockchain tech, that can literally be the fabric of how money moves around the world and assets are represented around the world. And it just unlocks new economies, commerce, new opportunity. And we didn't reach our full potential because the blockchain that had the most decentralized, most secure, most scalable design never did any like marketing or outreach, just never had any presence. And then the problem is that's fine because it's decentralized infrastructure. The problem is when other blockchains come in that aren't actually blockchains and they're companies and they're masquerading and they make a bunch of trade-offs and they have a bunch of money and they start saying that we're the future of finance, we're the actual answer to global finance. And then the competitive spark sort of sparked inside of me. Like, Ethereum's not going to win by default, unfortunately, because the winds changed from when blockchains were, under attack from regulatory perspective, from institutional perspective. Like, no one wanted them to win because they were too risky. Mm-hmm. When the wind shifted and it was like, we're going to have a blockchain renaissance, it is really, really important for the adoption to be done correctly and on infrastructure that's going to last for decades, not just one or two political regimes.
Yeah.
And I firmly believe Ethereum is the best infrastructure for that. So yeah, there was a gap and everyone wanted to build on Ethereum. Everyone wanted to learn what Ethereum was, but there's no one just going to Wall Street and saying, hey, here is how you can use Ethereum. Here's what L2s are. Here's what tokenization is. And so that seemed like a pretty opportune gap to fill. Mm-hmm. And I also know how Wall Street works. Like, they want to talk to legitimacy. They want to talk to institutions. They don't want to talk to startups. So we got the blessing from Vitalik and from the EF, and we work very closely with them. But we're to set up an independent entity that would go around to Wall Street and say, let's teach you about Ethereum. And that's how Etherealize started. It actually started almost exactly a year ago, where I was doing a lot of just discovery. I was like, do we actually need to have something like Etherealize? And so we had hundreds and hundreds of meetings. Like, we went to I kept my network from Wall Street the previous decade. So I was like, let's go ask them all. Are they ready to use Ethereum? Do they want to tokenize things? Is this L2 thing cool? Do they think Base is like a cool business model? The answer was a resounding yes. So we're like, okay, there's clearly appetite for Ethereum. So let's hit the launch button on Etherealize. And the reception was way bigger than I ever would have imagined. And here we are. But no, it's inspiring. I think we were just trying to fill a gap and help the platform that should be the backbone of finance be the backbone of finance.
Well, I think that's what's interesting, because from the outside looking in, it wouldn't have seemed like the answer would have been a resounding yes back then, because, just to kind of look back in time, this was obviously before we had all these digital asset treasuries popping up, and you have the likes of Tom Lee and everyone else going on CNBC and talking about why ETH is going to take over the world when it comes to that. This is all before then. And so that narrative wasn't really being displayed on mainstream channels yet. And I think, to your point on competitiveness, there were a lot of people talking within the Ethereum community of, is Solana going to take the cake here? And so, talk to me about that piece, because it's come such it's been night and day, I feel like. So I would say props to you guys and what you've done, and props to that narrative catching on. But it seems like something changed last year.
I think it was a perfect storm of a lot of things. So I think we played a small and meaningful part. So I'm happy we could do that. But no, a lot of the ecosystem came together, and it was really, really heartening because, again, it would be a shame for the technology to exist and no one to use it. And so we want to come light a spark and fire. I think a few things changed. One is institutions' default has always been Ethereum to build on and to tokenize things on. But there's this crazy phenomenon, which is why part of our mandate is to work on ETH, the asset, too. Mm-hmm. But there's this crazy phenomenon where even though the technology might be the institutional technology, if the asset price isn't in vogue, people equate the two to the health of the network, and rightfully so, because the asset secures the network. But yeah, ETH price wasn't doing well from basically the merge until late last year. Yeah, and part of that is because the Ethereum ecosystem is played by the rules. Ethereum blockchains were in purgatory for 4 years. Ethereum is probably the most punished by that, because Bitcoin achieved commodity status and you couldn't really innovate on Bitcoin. So it was pretty simple as digital gold. So it survived the bear market. Other, again, centralized company blockchains, they just didn't care about the rules. So they just kept on innovating and offshore or whatever and taking market share. And Ethereum's, there were lawsuits against Ethereum. Like the SEC was looking at Ethereum. All that's public. So like Ethereum was in a tough spot. So the real time for Ethereum's inflection was when the regulatory regime changed. I would argue all that happened just now. So institutions were building in the background. Everyone's forked Ethereum and built on it. Everyone's like tried pilot programs. That when was it all going to snowball into a big inflection point? I call it the ChatGPT moment. It was literally right now when now it's a regulatory green light. The stablecoin bill passed. There's a presence of Ethereum in front of institutions and in front of policymakers, and now the treasury companies have also stepped in to add fuel to that fire. So now it's finally, everything that was a headwind is now becoming a tailwind, and that's why I think it's like the moment where we're going to see everything work, and yeah, I'm excited about it.
Yeah, no, I left one thing off the timeline too in terms of that, which is you put out the report that Ethereum is digital oil, and I don't remember when that was, but it was like, I think, around the same time as Tom getting involved with BitMine. It was before Tom getting involved. And so it was kind of like starting to, because that was an original, like, you can go back to like clips of Kevin O'Leary even like talking about that, I think in the last cycle of like, look, this is how you should look at these things. But no one really kind of like explained, I don't think, to the detail you guys did, why that was the case. And to your point, I feel like there are so many things about like Ethereum's token, like the way that it's, perhaps even, depending on what's going on day to day, more disinflationary than Bitcoin. And like there were pieces of that just weren't being told or understood by even people in Ethereum. So I don't know. I guess like my lens and looking through things similar to you through like the economist lens, it was just like, why isn't Ethereum telling this story? And it sounds like that was also kind of where you were coming from.
It was. And so Etherealize is an infrastructure and products company. I want us to rewire as much of Wall Street as possible with Ethereum infrastructure and then bring that to the rest of the world and create incredible infrastructure and products and use cases. And that's why for the first discovery period before we launched Etherealize officially, I would go talk about layer twos, I would go talk about tokenization, I would go talk about building applications and different DeFi applications and smart contracts and all the cool things you can do there. And that's the mandate. That actually will always be the mandate. But as ETH, the asset, just didn't have as much of a spotlight, and Bitcoin did, and other Altel ones which should not have the spotlight did. Again, it's the competitive spirit. It's like, wait a second, we have this incredibly designed asset that arguably should be on a parity with Bitcoin. In some ways, a lot of ways, it's actually a better store of value than Bitcoin. It gets no light of day. There isn't an ETF narrative. People should tell the world about this asset because it secures the network where all of finance is gonna trade. So we took a little bit of a side quest. I took a little bit of a side quest and said, okay, let's champion ETH, the asset. Let's talk about every single part of it and translate it to institutional terms, translate it to financial terms. Things like Bitcoin has a supply cap. It may or may not be sustainable, but it has a supply cap. ETH has an issuance cap. That makes it really easy to understand. ETH has a yield. ETH has a burn. Like, all transactions do ultimately flow value back to ETH. It's this wonderful asset. So we said, let's put together as a community, as a whole ecosystem. We got a lot of people to co-author, put their names on it because it's very Ethereum coded. So I said, let's publish a report like our magnum opus on digital oil. Let's say why this is the best reserve asset out there and the best store of value out there. And yeah, again, the timing was the timing. I mean, as we launched that and published it, and we got a lot of press on it, we got a lot of good, we sent it to hundreds and hundreds of institutions, and people started to sense that, okay, maybe the portfolio shouldn't just be Bitcoin, maybe it's Bitcoin and ETH. And then when the treasury companies started, it was just the perfect 1-2 punch.
Yeah.
And the treasury companies are now going to perpetuate that narrative. So I almost think that, I care deeply about ETH, the asset. We've done a lot of focus on it. We help treasury companies. We even helped advise some, like ETHZilla. But now that is in motion, the biggest prize is focusing on integrating Ethereum infrastructure into society, into the financial system. So we actually improve the financial system, and so we had to almost come home to that. And now that ETH is doing well, Ethereum is front and center. The moment's now to get as much adoption as possible. So the race is on. Yeah,
I think you hit on a lot of things there too, because I think it is important to highlight all the hard work that needed to get done to kind of reach this phase where I think, even people who may have been ETH detractors cannot deny that the pendulum has swung back, that the momentum has kind of swung back, and that, flows have swung back. And I feel like now, and we can get into, what comes next later on in the interview, but I think for like now, I do want to highlight the key piece that you mentioned where if this piece didn't fall into place, if the regulation piece didn't fall into place, then like all that you're talking about probably wouldn't have been able to play out. And you were just down in DC, you were chatting with the House Financial Services Committee in your testimony. What was that like, going down to DC and kind of, I want to say twist the narrative, like flip the narrative, because like, I've been in this seat at Coinage since 22 when we started, and like the idea of everyone in DC going to, okay, crypto is a scam, like that is what you're fighting against. That's what anyone in crypto is fighting against. And it was no more apparent in crypto winter after the FTX collapse that like almost everyone thought everything to do with crypto was a scam.
Understandable.
So talk to me about kind of like the work to be done there and how your personal experience has played out in doing that.
It's been the most inspiring and honestly coolest thing ever. I mean, we are technically still a startup, even though we feel like it's pretty institutional now. But yeah, 9 months into a startup, getting called to the House Financial Services to represent Ethereum and talk about Ethereum and how it's going to integrate with the financial system was the most inspiring thing ever. It means that there's product market fit, and people want to adopt public blockchains. Just they want to do it responsibly, which means Ethereum to me. But coming back to it, policy is a similar thing as working on ETH, the asset. They're all necessary things for institutional adoption. Like going back to the digital oil piece, I just went into too many meetings where Ethereum is the dominant platform, but people would say, okay, well, the price sucks and other L1 prices are higher, so why should we do Ethereum? So I was like, you know what, we need to fix this. We just need to change the narrative on the price, because that will help with actual technological adoption. It's the same thing on the regulatory front. If we didn't have tailwinds from the regulatory front and a green light to say go build responsibly on Ethereum, no one's going to do it. So we had to go help with that. So I mean, I think we were some of many players that helped change the narrative on the ETH price. And so now when I go in and pitch Ethereum, the technology, and tokenizing on Ethereum, it's a lot easier now. So clearly, like that, it was necessary. On the policy front too, Ethereum didn't really have a presence, and understandably so, because it had been under attack by the previous regime. Now when the regime opened doors and said, come in, like understandably so, like it's not like everyone wants to rush in and be like, oh great, let's become like super politically charged. Yeah. And I don't necessarily think Ethereum should be super politically charged, but what I think we should do is educate and have a presence in DC, so when people want to hear from the Ethereum ecosystem, have a neutral voice that's fairly nonpartisan, and say that here's why the technology is awesome. And I think one reason why I got the opportunity to go testify is because I strongly believe that Ethereum specifically is the most positive sum technology. So like adopting it helps the regulators, it helps institutions, it helps cut costs and make more money. It's neutral, no one owns it. It's not like you're using someone else's platform. Yeah. It's not, you're really not selling anything. You're just saying, here's this amazing infrastructure, let's build the next wave of innovation on top of it. And that's an important that's a message that resonates with policymakers and with institutions, because again, it's a platform. I mean, one of my favorite, we spent a lot of time writing our testimony and oral, but one of my favorite quotes is that Ethereum is a platform that can be accessed by all and is owned by none. And so that's really important. That's what decentralization actually is. So being able to go educate on that, it's really, really neat, because we, for the first time, have the opportunity to convince both institutions and policymakers that this is the right architecture and technology to integrate in, and we need to do it responsibly so we don't have another FTX. And no, I'm glad that we have a presence there, and we will continue to have a presence there. It'll just get narrower and narrower. Now it'll be for specific use cases instead of just like, here's Ethereum, because I think cross the Rubicon on that, which is amazing.
people understand that.
Yeah, well, 6 or 8 months ago, it was not that. Well, I can't believe how much has changed from 6 to 8 months ago, but no, I'm a lot happier now.
I mean, yeah, if you look at the chart, that's one way to kind of at least see it visually, and it does capture, I think, a little bit of the momentum around what has changed. But I think that there are so many different pieces that have changed, and I want to kind of double down on what you said around DC and explaining this to people, because that was also our experience. So for us at Coinage, kind of going down there, and again, us being an experiment, when a lot of people were building offshore, I was like, I'm an American, I'm here. Like, why would I want to go start this somewhere else? And so we looked at US laws and we're like, well, cooperatives are just DAOs. Like, there's already a legal framework here.
Yeah.
And so we're like, let's launch this as a DAO co-op here in Colorado. And that's what we did. And ETH Denver, John Poller, same lawyer, same framework, where, it was really cool to navigate that and then to go down in DC and explain it. But like you said, we didn't want to do that in 23 or 24. That wasn't going to happen because I didn't want to bring any more attention to us than was necessary. But I do think there's kind of like a reawakening of like an understanding that, okay, decentralization, shared governance, shared upside, and like tokenizing all of this is something that like is uniquely American if you look at our experiment as a country.
Literally American values. I mean, it's exactly right.
Yeah. And so I don't know. It was fun to go down there and chat with the crypto task force and try and tell them like, look, we're just a co-op. Co-ops are legal. Co-ops aren't securities, and we're bringing it on chain. And it was like a fun exercise to like see them understand how a lot of crypto is similar, just more efficient. Yeah. And I feel like if that's my experience and my awakening in DC, for you, obviously you're dealing with probably some bigger players on Wall Street, and obviously the dollars attached to maybe some of these things happening is going to be a much larger impact to Ethereum's overall size. I mean, talk to me about what your expectations are now that all those pieces have fallen into place, and we can get into digital treasuries in a second, but just in general, like what you're expecting once you piece stablecoins with tokenized funds and all of kind of the prize at the end of the rainbow that you see playing out.
Yeah, first off, the size part's not important. It's the precedent that we're setting. So, I mean, whether it's getting Wall Street assets and activity on chain or creating standards for like you're doing with co-op tokens and distributing out, it's the same thing. It's unlocking innovation that wasn't possible before by using blockchain. So yeah, like props to everything you're doing with that, and keep pushing on that, because how are we going to bring sustainable value to new tokens? It's by passing through cash flows.
Yeah.
I mean, most of the world, except for Bitcoin and ETH, which restores value, should be valued off cash flows, like securities. So,
well, I want to talk to you about that too, because I feel like there was like a shift, and John and I talked about this too at ETH Denver. Where it's like a lot of the people in the Ethereum camp are kind of pushing the infinite garden kind of idea. I don't want to say that that's not like capitalistic in the sense of how people like thought about some of this stuff. But I don't think there's anything wrong with looking at cash flows and being like, hey, this is a business that's going to make money.
It's not, but infrastructure is different than cash flows. Bitcoin and Ethereum are infrastructure for the world to run on. Bitcoin's the gold infrastructure that you can sit on. And Ethereum's the global infrastructure platform that you can build anything on. Financial applications, but also cooperatives, ways to get revenue to creators, ways to have ownership of NFTs and even real property. And you handicap ETH's potential if you look at it as just a company. Ethereum is not a company. Again, other L1s I would argue are. Ethereum is not. So it needed to re-rate from whoever put the cash flow meta on. Did some damage, but now you need to re-rate to infrastructure, because infrastructure is what Ethereum and Bitcoin actually are, and everything in the Ethereum economy can have cash flows. Protocols are the next version of companies, and as they all generate cash, some of that should go to token holders, and then suddenly you have this amazing flywheel for you can value tokens in the Ethereum ecosystem. You can create your own protocol, create your own company.
Yeah. We
just needed to have the regulatory green light to bring it back to DC. We need to have the regulatory green light for there to be a framework. Like, I personally, if I want to keep going on hot takes, is I don't really care about the security or non-security thing as long as we have a framework for doing both. So
I only cared about it too because I don't want to go to jail. Hey, we need a framework here, and if you're good with it, I'm good with it, and let's go with that. And that's kind of how we landed on it. But I do think to continue it and think about digital treasuries now, getting into that piece, because I don't know. I mean, I guess they don't necessarily need to come at a cost, but there is a good question from other people in our community who are talking about, hey, at what point does this trend go too far in one direction, where you might have a very small amount of people or companies controlling a very large chunk of Ethereum? And to your point, Ethereum's kind of always been the poster child of decentralization. And so like, it's fine if it's digital gold and Michael Saylor owns a bunch, because like it's not proof of stake. He's not gonna be able to influence things. It is what it is.
Yes,
on the Ethereum side, is there ever like a fear of like it going too far too fast? It could start to like sacrifice some of the sauce that made Ethereum what it is?
Yeah, I mean, the point on the Bitcoin side is hash rate's centralizing like crazy. So I mean that's a whole different question.
Yeah.
On the Ethereum side is I just think it's too positive sum. Like there's the amount of asset managers that exist in the traditional finance system. It's got to be thousands, if not tens of thousands. The amount of hedge funds, family offices, like public vehicles that do private assets. Like it's literally like tens or hundreds of thousands of investment firms. We have like 5 digital asset treasuries for Ethereum. Like there's a lot of room for upside in that. And no, they're all really, really interesting because most of the world, at least for the time being, will not hold their own private keys and will not do DeFi activities and will not stake for now. That will get easier. There's a bunch of UX upgrades in Ethereum, and it's going to get easier and easier to just use Face ID and get more and more secure ways to do it. But for now, no one's going to do that. At least the general public's not. Yeah. So you can access crypto Ethereum in 2 ways: the ETFs, which are great, and they'll have staking soon. They'll be even greater. Or the treasury companies where you can actually use the Ethereum economy. And so if you want exposure to the Ethereum economy, it's almost like an ETF of the Ethereum economy because they'll all have different identities. I don't think we're even close to saturation because that's like saying that the Ethereum economy is saturated. There's so many different things you can do. Some can restake, some can stake, some can do riskier DeFi things and then disclose them, obviously, and like they'll have higher risk, but that's part of investment companies. Some will use real world assets for augmenting yield. So the more the merrier. I think they will actually be the treasury companies will be the showcasing of Ethereum's potential. And there'll be quarterly reports from all of them telling the world about everything Ethereum you can do on Ethereum, and it's going to catalyze DeFi, the next DeFi summer. It's going to use a lot of protocols. They're also very positive. It's
been an interesting thing because again, we're a DAO, Coinage is a DAO, so we have a lot of different takes from a lot of different members who have different vantage points and like have these discussions, which I think is actually maybe perhaps the coolest thing that we have to offer is like, hey, there's a token gated Telegram and people are talking about different ideas and different things. And net sum, obviously, clearly, also, we are an asset, a treasury company at the same time because we have most of our treasury in ETH. Yeah. And so we're all the way down. We're on the list, but we're all the way at the bottom of the list because we're a co-op, so we don't have a lot of ETH, but we do have our treasury.
I love that.
So it's cool to be on the list, and it's cool to be a co-op, so everyone who buys a Coinage NFT owns the same amount, which is distinct from a publicly traded treasury company that has shareholders. And so like there are different elements. And so from where we sit, obviously number go up, we're all on board because our treasury grows in dollar terms significantly.
It's positive sum.
So that's great. And then I think, in terms of Ethereum being the place to be, it's also why we built on ETH in 22 because it was like, which chains here are going to stand the test of time? It's the safest bet.
Agree.
And so now I'm looking at things and I'm like, okay, this is cool because things are trending in the right direction. And to your point, it's really just scratching the surface of like how many other entities can be built the way that we've built ourselves in media, but for almost everything. And now we have Vitalik talking about ETH being kind of the ledger as like the new lens of looking through. It's like, okay, ETH is the ledger. I'm curious about your take on that branding because like you said, you wouldn't have necessarily agreed with like the cash flow branding from before. It's like this narrative has changed a few different times, but like I think the decentralization one is almost like the coolest one to me.
It is, but I don't think it's changed. I think everything you've said encompasses Ethereum. I mean, I think it still falls exactly within the narrative we said. First off, whether you're number 1 on strategic ETH reserve or number 20,
we're like 62. I think,
but it doesn't matter because Ethereum lets people build protocols, which protocols are very efficient companies. So the profitability of profitability is all that matters, right? So like you can build profitable protocols, whether you own 10 ETH or 100,000 ETH, and each one can generate cash flow. Each one can distribute cash flows different ways. Like this is an innovation machine. Like the real narrative for Ethereum really is the world computer. It's just that's too broad and people don't get it. So we're like, okay, let's break it down. Let's say ETH is oil, it powers financial infrastructure. ETH is financial infrastructure, but eventually it's going to be financial and corporate infrastructure, and eventually it's going to be the place you can launch a small business. Just like you can use AI to cut a bunch of costs and then unlock revenue, you can use blockchain to cut a bunch of costs, unlock payments, unlock asset ownership. That's
the biggest thing for us.
That's
why people are coming to us now. And they're saying, hey, can we copy your infrastructure? Not to keep using the same term, but they're like, hey, you've already built this where an NFT holder can come and say they are who they say they are and then unlock a dividend and then get a tax form.
So you can franchise that. I mean, you can scale that. So just like a normal business, you can now scale that like at the speed of software. So you're not the speed of hardware or of legacy systems anymore.
Yeah.
That to me is the coolest thing, is now you have so much potential with this platform that you've chosen to build on. So again, A, thanks for that. And B, it's that's a case study. So I mean, as Ethereum, we should be highlighting case studies like the treasury companies for financial use cases. We should be highlighting the ETFs, we should be highlighting real world tokenization, but we really should be highlighting exactly what you're doing and amplifying it as a case study and saying that this is what you can do. Because when small businesses start building their backend and their infrastructure based on Ethereum tech, then it's game over. Then everyone, it's the most positive outcome ever. So again, it's really cool what you're doing. I would love to dig into that more and use it as case study.
I think that was the coolest piece for me too. Is like it didn't dawn on me until we chatted with a co-op tax accountant. So it's like one of the largest. They just merged, so they're like one of the largest co-op tax firms in the U.S. And he didn't know anything about crypto. Didn't know jack shit about crypto at all. And he's like, wait a minute, so all you're doing is you've built like a more efficient way to like run co-op? And I'm like,
exactly.
Yeah, I guess. And he's like, oh, okay. And like that's cool because I didn't even realize this till we went down to the SEC, but like 1 in 3 Americans are members of co-ops.
I did not
And so
know
like
that.
it's a massive thing. And so the TAM, like, I don't know, got really big in my head. But I don't know if anyone in Ethereum even knows about us. So thank you for saying that. Because
we should be. The amount of business ideas you've like sparked and things and case studies, it's cool.
I mean, I think that it's cool just to like see, again, like you said, there is a lot of work that went into this to get to this point now. And now that you're here, now that Etherealize has done that work too, along with so many other people, like where are you most excited about this next chapter? Now that you're no longer kind of playing catch up like you were 2 years ago. It's like, all right, ETH's in pole position. So what does it want to do now?
I think we get to go to the most fun part, which is the acceleration phase, which is where we have this window. I don't think the window is forever. I think the spotlight is on the crypto ecosystem, and within the crypto ecosystem, the spotlight is now on Ethereum. And it's taken a long time to get there, but I'm very, very, now it's what is the most amount of positive impact we can affect with all the winds that are back, with the whole wind at our back. Yeah. And to me, it kind of comes back to the original thing I got into Ethereum for, which is to rewire Wall Street's infrastructure. Let's plug all of Wall Street into Ethereum and then see how the financial system works when it settles and everything's on a blockchain. And that's already starting with tokenization. Like that's like, can't put that genie back in the bottle. It's starting with like automated trading and settlement. You can't put that genie back in the bottle, but can we now accelerate that with the correct regulatory frameworks, with the right infrastructure? Can we push forward compliant privacy? Can we just build the future of Wall Street and with Wall Street?
Yeah.
That's what brought me in. That's what excites me the most. That's what we're gonna be like laser focused on. And I mean, still do a lot of policy things, still work on ETH, the asset. It's still really, really important. I still think it should be the most valuable asset.
Well, I wanted to ask you about that because I guess to wrap up and synthesize everything that we talked about in this interview, like the last thing, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you as a former Wall Street guy to kind of put the pieces together. Because we had Tom Lee say, ETH's going to 10K. And then a couple weeks went by, and then he's like, it's actually 15K now. And I was like, wait a minute, hold on now. But I think it's because, he had seen so much of what he can do at BitMine. And also, to your point, you also being a strategic advisor at another digital asset treasury. Like, how do you put the pieces together and say this is where ETH can go?
I think we are in the process of re-rating it to become global infrastructure. And so in our digital oil piece, I mean, when ETH is the infrastructure that the whole world, both financial and non-financial, all businesses settle on, and we put $700,000 as a target. There's obviously a lot of things that have to happen to get there, but I think a $10 trillion asset is not out of question for global infrastructure where many, many new economies are building on, and that means an 80K ETH. So I think we've almost been in this like PTSD thing where ETH has been performing so badly price-wise for so long that like people just don't dream big anymore. You're like, oh, we were trying to get to 10K last cycle, and then there were a lot of market forces that didn't, and then FTX blew up and everything. So like, I don't know. I think we have to dream a lot bigger. I think we're building the infrastructure for the whole global economy, and that's a $10 trillion asset. So higher, my target's higher than anyone else's. But that said,
80K is definitely up there.
I mean, 706K is really up there too. But no, I just think that we're gonna reprice. Like, it will be Bitcoin, then it was Bitcoin, then it will be Bitcoin and ETH. And I think more and more it's going to become, hey, why don't we just do ETH? And you're seeing that. Bitcoin mining companies are switching to become ETH treasury companies. Everyone we talk to about these treasury assets, they're like, oh, we know why Bitcoin is backing some of them, but now they're starting to say, wait, you can do more with ETH. So why would this not be a better treasury asset? And that's where all this begins. So I'm excited to let that narrative play out. And,
yeah. No, I mean, we got to have you back on for it, too. I know this was just the first time we've had you on Coinage, but Vivek, I can't thank you enough for coming out here, man, and taking the time. And congrats again on the progress. And I'm in the same camp. Well, it's going to be exciting to watch what happens next. And so hopefully we can have you back on for that.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. And congrats on everything you've been doing, too.
Thanks, man. Appreciate that.